evening. Happy Wednesday. Glad that you're here. We're going to sing number 503 in our hymn book there. 503, Singing I Go. 503. The trusting heart to Jesus clings, nor any ill forebodes, but at the cross of Calvary sings, praise God for lifted loads. Singing I go along life's road, praising the Lord, praising the Lord. Singing I go along life's road, for Jesus has lifted my soul load. Verse 2. The passing days bring many cares, fear not, I hear him say. And when my fears are turned to prayers, the burdens slip away. Singing I go along life's road, praising the Lord, praising the Lord. Singing I go along life's road, for Jesus has lifted my load. And the fourth verse. When to the throne of grace I flee, I find the promise true. The mighty arms upholding me will bear my burdens too. Singing I go along life's road, praising the Lord, praising the Lord. Singing I go along life's road, for Jesus has lifted my load. Good singing there. We do have a reason, certainly, for a song in our hearts. Thanks for being here this Wednesday night. Glad we could meet here right in the middle of the week and spend this time together. I'm glad we all made it swimming into the service, and so just glad you're here. If you're joining us by live stream, we're glad that you're with us as well, and we hope that you'll be encouraged. Some things coming up just to certainly be aware of, we've mentioned, but want to keep before you. The Secret Sister drawing will be this Sunday, and so if you'd like to be a part of that ministry, a ladies' encouragement ministry, make sure you fill out one of the sheets that's on the round table in the lobby. And then the First Ladies Fellowship of the season is this Saturday here at the church building in the fellowship hall. Bring a dish to pass, enjoy fellowship and food and games, and so looking forward to that as well. And then October 18th comes our hayride. Looking forward to that occasion. October 18th, we'll enjoy that time together. Dave is excited about making his bean soup and chicken noodle soup, and we'll have some other things along as well. And so just looking forward to that time of food and fellowship. So and a hayride here at the church property. So October 18th at 4 o'clock. Just remember that that's headed our way as well. Let's have a word of prayer and we'll get into our Bible study for this evening together. Heavenly Father, thank you that we can meet here as we have done. I pray that you'll encourage our hearts, that you'll help us appreciate the beauty and the blessing of being a servant, that you'll help us in life find those places where we can make a difference, where we make an impact. I pray that you'll help us see some good truths from your word about being a servant. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Isaiah chapter number 6 is where we'll begin this evening. Isaiah chapter number 6 and verse number 8. Isaiah chapter 6 and verse number 8. We won't take a verse out of context here, but we will just look at a single verse as it makes a point that we'll consider about serving others. We've looked at Jesus' example. He washes the disciples' feet to their shock, not because of what he did, but because of who he was, and he's washing the feet of disciples. And we saw that Jesus said to his disciples, the greatest is not the one that pushes to the top and earns the recognition of his fellows. The greatest is the servant, and points them to the greatness of being a servant. Well, I want us to look at maybe one great attribute of a servant tonight for us to consider, and that's the point of being available. Being available. We're not all the same, and we're not all the best at what we do, but we can be available. And I want to see that demonstrated here in the life of Isaiah. Some of the prophets, they would say things like God called me from my mother's womb. John the Baptist certainly fit that criteria. Jeremiah, you had this laid out for me. In other cases, it seems like God called them along the way. In the case of Elisha, when Elijah came by. And here in the case of Isaiah, a scribe who becomes a prophet. Look at verse number 8 of Isaiah 6. It says, "Also, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then said I, Here am I, send me." Isaiah has this vision of God, and it's an interesting time when it happens. It's in the year that King Uzziah died. Isaiah wrote down some of the works of Uzziah, some of the decisions the king made. But one cataclysmic decision that king made was to involve himself in the altar, where a place that the king wasn't allowed to be. And he intrudes into that space, and he was feeling powerful because he was the king. And they said, "Hey, you need to be out of here. This is not your place." And he says, "Well, I'll do what I want to do. Anybody forget to tell you I'm the king around here?" And he was struck with leprosy. And so the king spends the last years of his life, or months of his life, in a several house where lepers lived, where they could live away from society and survive. And while he's there, Isaiah still scribes some things about King Uzziah. But in the year he died, Isaiah has this vision of God, of His holiness, of His majesty, of who He is. And then he hears God say, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And Isaiah says, "Here am I, send me." I think it would be a stretch to believe that Isaiah said that in arrogance and pride. Already he'd seen the holiness of God. He said, "Woe is me, I'm undone, I'm a man of unclean lips." It's not Isaiah saying, "Well, you got the right guy for the job. You need somebody to be a prophet. You should see, I've got the oratory and the knowledge, and I'm the one for the job." It's not that kind of a response here. It's I'm available. Here am I, send me. This thing of being available. Jesus served and blessed with His disciples. He tried to give them the mindset of serving to make a big impact. Sometimes we think, well, if I were different than I am, then I could serve. If I were greater than I am. One of the things about our human nature, I think we admire in other people what we lack in ourselves. We admire. I was a very shy and timid person, and I met my wife, and she was very, not shy and not timid, and that was something I admired about her. We admire those things, but the danger sometimes is we think there's only one type of servant, or there's only one set of skills that are necessary. Isaiah hears the question, who will go? Who will meet this need? Who will go for us? Whom shall I send? Well, if I were different, if I were smarter, if I were more talented, if I were more gifted. No, the point is to be available. To be available. I learned this as a child when we answer the telephone. If we are the first ones to the phone and somebody said, "Hey, I need to talk to your dad," here's what we were supposed to say if he wasn't around. He's not available. What we weren't supposed to say is, he's gone, because you don't know who on the other end perhaps you're saying, "Hey, my dad's not here," to. We weren't supposed to say, "Oh, he's asleep on the couch." Here's what we're supposed to say. Or, "He's chasing my brother around because my brother's being mischievous." We were supposed to say, if he can't come to the phone, he's not available. We didn't tell people on the phone that he had to attend to personal matters in the restroom. That's not what you tell somebody on the phone. Here's what you say: he's not available. That was the message we were supposed to deliver. Not available. Not saying he's not here. He's just not available for whatever you need a conversation about. He's not available right now. Isaiah says here, I'm available. Whom should I send? Who will go for us? He says, I am available. And Isaiah being available starts this whole thing of him serving as a prophet. He's available. Be available to serve others. And Isaiah is. Were others more talented than Isaiah? I think it's possible. This isn't Isaiah saying, well, I will be the best one for you to send. This is Isaiah saying, you're asking, and I'm here, and I'm willing. I'm the one who's available. Being available. Many times we use something that's available that's not the best for the job. We use something that's available. You ever write down something on an envelope because you didn't have a notepad handy? A notepad is better for that. Sometimes they have lines. They help keep your writing straight. But I don't have a notepad. Here, I'm going to write this on an envelope or write it on something else. Sometimes we'll use a screwdriver as a pry bar. You can break a screwdriver that way. And why would you do it? It's not the best thing for the job. If it needs prying on, then you go get a pry bar. It's hardened metal. That's the better thing for the job. The reason you use a screwdriver is because the screwdriver's there and the pry bar's somewhere else, wherever the kids left it the last time they had it. So you use what's available, even if what's available is not the best thing for the job. It's there and it's available. Sometimes you use your shoe for a hammer. A shoe does not make a good hammer, but that nail is there begging to be put back into place, and you grab your shoe off and you go to whacking at the nail. Why? Not because a shoe is great as a hammer, but the shoe is closer to you than the hammer is, so you use the shoe for a hammer. We use many times the thing that's available to us, even if it's not the best thing for the job. And when you need it, it's available. Now it's useful. And here's the thing about God. He honors the heart. He honors the heart of Isaiah that says, I'll go. I'm here. You need somebody to speak for you. I'll do that. You could use me to do that. It's not Isaiah saying that he's the best for the job. It's Isaiah saying, I'm available for this purpose that you have here. So a humble heart, a willing to serve and make a difference, this thing of being available. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter number 1, and we'll read an interesting statement Paul makes about this matter. 1 Corinthians chapter number 1. 1 Corinthians chapter number 1, about being available and what is best for the job. 1 Corinthians chapter number 1. Maybe one of the great dangers of social media is this. We can fall into comparisons very, very easily. And that can be dangerous to us, detrimental. I was reading an article about that, about the concerns the Christian psychologist has dealing with young teenage girls who feel some insecurities, and they see the profiles online, and there's filters and all of this. It is funny what you can do with a filter. My kids will tell me, Dad, smile, let me take your picture. And then they know how to add 500 pounds to my face with some kind of filter. It just got a nice big round head, or make my head look like a bowling ball. They're full of great and creative ideas to do with these things. The problem is it can mask reality, and people think, boy, I've got to live up to that. And it's impossible in the first place. So there's a danger there of comparison. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, look at verse number 26. It's a statement Paul makes about the way of the Lord at work. It says, for ye see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. Does God care about the wise men after the flesh, the highly intelligent? Sure He does. Does He care about the mighty? I mean, the people that can move things and affect things and accomplish things. Does He care about them? Surely He cares about them. Does He care about the noble, the high and the exalted? Sure, He cares about them. Why then are there not many of those? Because many times those are pursuing other things. They're not available when God speaks. Look at verse 27. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and the base things of the world, and things which are despised hath God chosen, yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught the things that are, that no flesh should glory in His presence. Well, if I were noble, then the Lord could use me and I could serve Him. Or if I were mighty according to might, and if I were wise according to the intelligence, then it could be useful. Why doesn't God use those so much when He loves those also? Because they're not often available. You remember Jesus called fishermen? Later, when they will speak to the rest of the Jewish nation at Pentecost, here was the observation from people watching, that these were unlearned and ignorant men, but they had understanding about Christ and about who He was. Unlearned and ignorant men. I don't think Jesus particularly went just seeking for ignorant men, but why use fishermen instead of the Pharisees? He cared for the Pharisees too. Why use Peter and James and John and these? Why them? Well, when Jesus said, forsake all and follow me, they did. They were available. It wasn't that He didn't care about the others, but they were available. Jesus explained this in a parable. Look at Luke chapter number 14, and we'll see this truth expressed. Jesus responds to the available. Not always the noble, the mighty, the best for the job. He works with what's available. Luke chapter number 14 in verse number 7. We find Jesus, He's a guest at a house in eating a feast, and He gives them a parable to teach them a lesson, verse 7. And He put forth a parable to those which were bidden. So they're at a feast, they're at a big supper, and He puts a parable to them. When He marked how they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them. They get to the feast and they choose the chief rooms. It would be sort of like a dash, right, to get to the best place, and they'd hurry their way in there and get the chief rooms. I don't know exactly what the equivalent would be, but I guess if it were a dash to the fellowship hall to sit at the table that gets set first. Have you ever been at those dinners where they say, okay, this table, you go ahead and go first? If we're ever at a dinner like that, don't sit by me, because you know what's going to happen. I'll just tell you now. We're going last. We're going to sit and watch people by us go by, get some good food, sit down, start eating, having good fellowship, and here's going to be us. Just waiting and waiting and waiting. You say, yeah, but if you sit at the one right by the serving table, I tried that. They started at the other end of the room. So then I think, well, I'll sit at the other side of the room. They're going to start there first. Guess what they do that time? We'll have this table go first. And they're right there. And so don't sit by me if it's that kind of dismissal sort of dinner. But in the feasting, they rush to the best seats. They get the upper rooms. They're the ones that are going to be served and exalted and honored. And that's where they rush for. And Jesus watched them. And so He speaks to them specifically about that. Look at verse number 8. It says, when thou art bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room. Hey, I want to be exalted. I want the place of honor. He says, lest a more honorable man than thou be bidden of him. He said, you elbow your way to the top and find out there's somebody much more deserving of that space than you. Then you're going to have quite a walk down the steps to wherever the other rooms are. Verse 9 says, and he that bade thee and him come and say to thee, give this man place, and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. I thought I was really something. Okay, well, you can think that as you go all the way down the steps to the lowest room where the least honored are. Verse 10, but when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room. Here's a humble heart. You just go sit where you find a place. Don't trample anybody on the way in. That when he that bade thee cometh, he may say unto thee, friend, go up higher. Oh, you're not in a seat that's commensurate with your honor. You come and you come with me. You come sit up higher where there's more honor. Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. Much better to be escorted to a better place because you were humble in the beginning than to be taken down to a lower place because you were proud in the beginning. Verse 11 says that. For whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. When Isaiah said, Here am I, send me, he was not trying to exalt himself. Boy, I'll be a prophet. I'd like to be exalted and honored. That wasn't Isaiah's approach to this. Isaiah's approach was, if you're asking, I'm here, I'm available, send me, and I'd be willing to go. Look at verse number 12. This continues here. Then said he also to him that bade him. So now he has a lesson for the master of the feast as well. He says, When thou makest a dinner or a supper, call not thy friends, nor thy brethren, neither thy kinsmen, nor thy rich neighbors, lest they also bid thee again, and a recompense be made thee. He said, when you make your feast, you want to be honored, don't call all of the people who can give you honor. Call the people who can give you nothing back. Serve them. In fact, look at verse 13. But when thou makest a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind. That doesn't make for great dinner companions, especially not at the day and age that this is written. You'd be taking in people for this feast that can't give you any kind of honor. They can't advance your career. There's not really anything in it for you. Why would you have those people over? You want to invite your rich friends, impress them, and then they invite you, and it just turns into this great thing. He says, no, invite the lame and the poor and the blind, and they can't advance you in any way here on earth. Look at verse number 14. And thou shalt be blessed, for they cannot recompense thee, for thou shalt be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. When is it all settled? Who gets honor and who doesn't get honor? At the resurrection of the just. So, serve the people who can't advance your cause, can't put you forward, can't lift you up, and serve them, and let things settle until the resurrection of the just. Serve in that way. Invite the lowly. They can't pay you back. No power to give you great honor, so serve them. Well, now look at verse number 16. It's a series of parables, and they all deal with feasting or supper or invitations. Verse number 16. Then said he unto them, A certain man made a great supper and bade many. You know what we'll discover about those many who are invited? They're not available. There's a few different reasons that they give in the parable, but they're not available. Nope, we're not handy to this. I've got other things I've got to do. Look how they make excuse, verse number 17 says. And sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, Come, for all things are now ready. And they all with one consent began to make excuse. You know what they're saying? We're not available for your supper. I know there's an eternal dimension to this. It's about people rejecting Christ for who He is, but there's also this very instructive part. The ones that didn't go weren't available. They had other things that were going on. Why is it that few of the mighty or the strong or the accomplished are called? Not because God doesn't care about them, but because a lot of times they're so busy doing other things, they're not available anymore. And that certainly we find here. The first one said unto him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must needs go and see it. I pray thee, have me excused. I'm not available. Verse 19, and another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray thee, have me excused. And another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. Another of the gospel accounts says, I must go and cheer her. And I've heard a preacher say with humor, he's the only one that had a legitimate excuse. But I have all of these purposes and reasons in life and directions in life. Have me excused. Here's a truth to consider. We could be busy all of our lives. And if we're not careful, not make ourselves available to God, to serve others, to meet needs of others. Busy, sure. I've got oxen, I've got ground, I just got married, I've got so many things going on. I can't really say to God, here am I, send me. Let me serve, let me be meaningful in someone else's life. Let me lift the fallen and be a help. I've got all these other things going on. So sometimes we can become busy, not available. They're rejecting Him in the spiritual sense, but it expresses also, I'm not available for you. And the call to you and to me is to seek for ways to save and to serve, and trusting God in that to lead us and direct us and help us. Let me show you another illustration of this. Look at 1 Samuel chapter number 13. 1 Samuel chapter number 13. We have an example of this truth expressed. 1 Samuel chapter number 13, and we'll begin reading with verse number 19. 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse number 19. And we'll read a moment here, a verse, and then I'll give the kind of the context of where this takes place and what's exactly going on here. Verse 19, it says, Now there was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel. Smith does not mean people named Smith, like last name Smith. This is smith as in blacksmith, somebody who could forge things out of metal. It says in verse 19, For the Philistines said, Lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. Here's the condition of things. The Philistines are in charge. They have won military victories, and in doing so, they took away the swords from the ability of the Israelites to fight with those weapons, and they made sure there's no blacksmith shop open in the land of Israel. We don't want them to make swords, and we don't want them to make spears. There's already military knowledge, meaning this: they know a sword is good for battle. That's a weapon that you use, and a spear is helpful in battle, so you use those weapons for those purposes. There's some military technology in play. But there's no blacksmith. There's nobody making swords, and there's nobody making spears. They're very careful about that. They're to themselves, they know it's a lot easier for us to hold them down if they can't make swords and they can't make spears. Verse number 20 tells us, But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share and his coulter and his axe and his mattock. If you needed some blacksmithing done, you had to go to the Philistines. A Philistine blacksmith shop. And that way they could make sure they're not making their own weapons. But look at verse number 21, and here's an interesting point. Yet they had a file for the mattocks and for the coulters and for the forks and for the axes and to sharpen the goads. If you needed real blacksmith type work done, you had to go to the Philistines to do it. But what they did have is they had files. They could sharpen those tools that they had. I watched a video, I think Ben Grimes lent me. It was Alone in Alaska, I think is the name of it. But it's a fellow who goes to Alaska. He builds his own log cabin up there, and he lives up there. He tried to build it, kind of rugged, how it would be for a pioneer to do, except he did put some plastic on the roof under the moss. He said, I felt bad about it, but not as bad as I was going to feel in the winter if water started coming into the cabin. But he builds this cabin with hand tools, and he builds it out of the trees that are there around him. And here's how he spent his evenings: sharpening the teeth on his saw, and sharpening the tools that he was going to use. He would just, evening after evening, this is how things would be at the end of the day, he'd spend his time sharpening those tools, because it mattered to have sharp tools for all of the work that he was doing and everything he was working on. So the Israelites have no smith, they don't have a stockpile of spears, and they don't have a stockpile of swords, but they do have a file to be able to sharpen their shovels and sharpen the ox goads and sharpen the different tools that they would use in farming and in gardening. Well, verse number 20 says, or 22, it says, "So it came to pass in the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul and Jonathan." Here's a question. If it's the day of battle and there's no sword in the hands of the people who are ready for a battle with Saul and Jonathan, what did they have in their hands? What did they use to be able to pursue a battle and defeat an enemy? Well, they didn't have spears and they didn't have swords, but they did have maybe shovels. They might have had pitchforks. They might have had ox goads. They had that sort of thing. Here's an army of farm implements and Saul and Jonathan. It says in verse 22, "But with Saul and with Jonathan his son was there found." Two swords. It's the day of battle. There's people gathered with them for a battle. What do they've got? A shovel. If you walked up to them and you interviewed them and you said, "Hey, do you think, are you guys trying to turn military technology some different way? Do you think a shovel is superior in a battle than a sword?" Surely the person would say, "No, a sword would be better for the battle, but a shovel's what I've got, and that's what I'm going to go with." You interview somebody else and they say, "Oh, I've got a rake." And you say, "Oh, is a rake better than a spear?" "Nope, but it's what I do have in my hand, and so I'm going to use a rake." Here's the truth about the Lord. He uses what's available to do His work. You say, "Yeah, but I'm not a shiny sword. I'm not a long spear with a sharp, pointy tip. I mean, I'm not the best tool for the job here." He doesn't need the best tool for the job. He needs what's available to him. They gather for battle. A battle will follow. Jonathan, Saul's son, is going to be heroic. And then as he exhibits some heroism and the enemy starts to flee and starts to struggle, here come the rest of the Israelites. Not with swords and not with spears. They don't have the right tools for the job or the best tools for the job. It's not great military strategy. Here's what they had. They had the farm tools, the farming tools that they had available, and that's what they used. Wouldn't it be nice if we were all a nice shiny sword? Sharp spear, I mean, strong and sharp, and we could, boy, you can do great battle with those good tools. But if you don't have those, a sharp shovel will do. A rake will work. It's not a spear. You say, "Oh, a spear would be much better for this job." What's best for the job is what's available. And in serving others, you don't have to be the best or the greatest or the wisest. You have to be who you are and make yourself available to God. So they weren't the appropriate tools for warfare, and yet they are the tools that the people used. Solomon made an observation. If you look at Ecclesiastes chapter 9 with me, Solomon makes a very interesting observation here about the matter in Ecclesiastes chapter number 9. It's sort of a side note, but it's a very, very interesting point. Ecclesiastes 9 in verse number 4. Ecclesiastes 9:4, it says this, "For to him that is joined to all the living there is hope." Right? While you live, there's hope. You're joined to the living, there's hope. And then he says this, "For a living dog is better than a dead lion." I used this in a sermon long ago, this exact verse, and I got done with the sermon and I had waxed eloquent about a living dog is better than a dead lion. Young man meets me in the lobby and he said, Pastor, I'd rather have the dead lion to show my friends. But his point is, a dog doesn't have the lion's majesty or its strength or its maybe beauty in that way. Maybe some dogs have its strength. And I remember the first time I saw somebody walking a Newfoundland. You ever hear of a Newfoundland? I thought for sure somebody was walking a black bear down the road. This thing was huge. It was a lady walking him, a little lady, and I thought, wait, are you taking him for a walk, or is he taking you for a walk? Because that was a big, big dog. But a dead lion can't really do anything for you, so a living dog is better. It's just an interesting comparison. And if you have a dog and you love your dog, I'm not trying to say that he's worse than a lion. I'd rather visit your house if you have a dog than if you have a lion. But Solomon's point is this. You got a dead lion, okay, but that's dead. A living dog is better. Be available. Be available. You say, I'm not the best one for it. But if you're the one that's there, then you are the best one for it. Yeah, but I'm not a good notepad, with straight lines and a reminder on top to trust the Lord. I'm just an envelope. Yeah, but sometimes an envelope's handy and you write on the envelope instead because it's there when you needed it. I'm not a big shiny sword or a sharp spear, and I can see I'm not the best one for this particular role. Other people could do this a whole lot better. Yeah, but if you're the one who's there, being available is that part of having a servant's heart. Who am I serving? I believe in my own heart there's better parents than me. But I'm the parents my children have. Why, there's other people that put it together better. At least they claim to, and I don't know. Sometimes it's not till after you talk to the kids that you really know for sure one way or the other, right? I remember the testimony of, I've never raised my voice to my wife in all these years of marriage. And it was like 50 years of marriage, something like that. I've never raised my voice to my wife. And I thought, well, that's amazing too. And then found out from one of the children in the matter that you can yell with your eyes. You don't even have to say anything, and you can yell with your expression. So there's better parents. I mean, it always takes talking to the kids to know, though, doesn't it? Well, here's what we did with our kids. I remember somebody asking me one time. They said, boy, what did your dad do with you guys for you to turn out the way you turned out? I think he meant it complimentary. He hadn't met all of my other brothers. But he asked me that question. I said, it's not some kind of secret thing. He did this or he did that or this part, this much devotion or worship or all of these sorts of things. I said, there was a reality in the pursuit of pleasing God. I'm not the best parent, but I'm the parents my children have. I'm available. It's not the ideal situation maybe that you find yourself in, but you're available. I've tried, especially when the kids were younger and they were within reach more often, to have one meaningful conversation with my children, each child, each day. Didn't always happen, but it was always my goal. One meaningful conversation about life, about them, about their interests, about the Lord, some meaningful conversation. Sometimes it went great, and I thought, boy, what spiritual giants these kids are. And other times, I would kind of try to convey something I thought was powerful, and then we'd drive past 7-Eleven and they'd say, oh, Dad, could I get a Slurpee? And I think, boy, I was just delivering to you great truths. I mean, things that are going to matter to you. Yeah, we'll go get a Slurpee. Other people might be better parents, but I'm the parent for my children, and I'm available. Yeah, but if you're just a shiny sword, then God can really use you. No, He'll use the person who's available. We're going to look next week at this idea. Serving starts at home. That's where it begins. You say, well, I'm waiting for God to call me to be a prophet. No, serving starts at home, and we'll see some ways that is lived out. What does God want from me to use my life or help it be meaningful? He wants you to be able to say, I'm here. You can send me. Direct me. Help me see clearly people I can serve, or ways that I can serve, or ways my life can make a difference. God uses who's available. Not the greatest, not the strongest, not the swiftest, not the most talented. He uses the one who's available. And on that point, all of us qualify. Whether we're a shovel or a rake, when we could be a spear or a sword, He uses what's available, and He'll use us to serve others if we'll seek that and if we'll seek Him. All right, we're going to